to talk about something, and it's like where Robert Kiyosaki has just announced that he's getting out of real estate. So for everyone watching, it's Small Business Saturday. Thanks for being here. Jarrett's back with us. Jay's bopping on in a little bit. We might hear from Jarrett's trip out west, talking to some cryptos. I'll let him reveal whatever he needs to reveal because that's his story. But real quick, Jarrett, you were about to talk about how I could be earning from real estate. So keep going with that.
Yeah, we were talking about Robert Kiyosaki, and I want to thank you for sharing that link because I didn't see that. That didn't come across my like day-to-day kind of look into Bitcoin, crypto, blockchain investing.
Yeah.
And the thing that I first want to say is I think that he's building one of the assumptions, his pre-assumptions for investing, good morning, Jay, is that he's saying the US president is a Marxist or has Marxist principles or ideologies,
Sure.
which I just think his underlying assumption is a little off. But I don't
Yes.
think that what he's talking about when it comes to real estate being kind of dead when you look at Bitcoin, I don't think that's off at all. So the thing we were talking about earlier, Grant, and the reason why I think you love real estate so much is that the cash flow. And I do think
Yeah.
the cash flow is a very important part of wealth building because I think it's some variant of cash flowing assets, but that the assets also appreciate. So you're holding something like real estate, you buy it for 500,000 and in 10 years, it's going to probably be worth 6, 7, 800,000, depending upon if there's a pandemic, depending upon other market forces. And the brilliant thing is you're going to create a system all throughout that time to probably be making a little bit of money, and you're not going to be paying off the debt on that asset or the mortgage on that asset. So there are a lot of good reasons, but I think what Kiyosaki is starting to see,
depending upon if there's a pandemic, depending upon.
Okay.
There we go.
But I think what Kiyosaki is starting to see, that others are starting to see, and I had this conversation the other day, so it's super fitting, is that even though you're going to get cash flow for the real estate, that is extremely good. But if you think of it this way, you have a rental property. Let's say you have a rental property and you make $1,000 a month off of it cash flowing. I don't know what kind of a property. We don't need to get into it, but you have a property, and after you pay down the mortgage, you pay the managerial fee for someone else to manage it. You're going to pay the taxes. You're going to put a little bit aside for the what if event, so you always have a little money just in case you need to fix up because the pipe bursts or something. Grant comes away with $1,000. Okay, so in a year, you're going to make $12,000 on this property. Right now, as rents rise, maybe every year you make a little bit more. Maybe in the next year you make $1,050. So $1,050. Excuse me, which is a 5% increase in your rent, right? And so,
Yeah.
very cool. Now the next year you're going to make X amount more, right? What I think Kiyosaki's realized, which is something that any Bitcoin maxi knows, is that real estate is cool, but you're never really going to increase your purchasing power over a long period of time. You're never actually going to get more wealthy. You're just going to probably be beholden to where actual inflation is, and it's always just going to rise that much, right? It's when it comes to rents or whatever you're going to get off of it. And with Bitcoin does what it's kind of the Bitcoin maxis and what I believe it's going to be, then going for something where you're not going to make any money for 4 or 5 years, but you're going to start to hold a bunch, you're actually going to have greater growth in your overall appreciation of the equity or the actual value. So you buy the property for $500,000. Let's just say after 5 years, it's worth $1 million because real estate is crazy right now, especially in the United States. I can't really speak for other places.
Yeah.
So you buy for $500,000. After 5 years, it's worth $1 million. Our working assumption is that every year you're going to make about $12,000 in rent. Okay. Now, this could change or not, but that means in 5 years, you're going to make $60,000 on top of the appreciating asset. Now, the asset has also gone up $500,000. So you'll take that home in equity, which is sweet if you decide to sell. That's money that's just in your pocket. So that's more or less around $560,000. Okay. Now, that also is on top of whatever you originally put down. Let's say you put down 20% of that 500,000 originally. So you want to outdo PMI, right? Which is private mortgage insurance. So you add 100,000 onto 560 560,000. And if you're still following me, people, I thank you because I'm kind of going a little quick here. So then you have $660,000 if you were to sell and walk away. What we're saying in the Bitcoin Maxi community is if you put $100,000 into Bitcoin straight up off the beginning and you wait 5 years, which is going to go through an entire bull to bear back to bull cycle due to the Bitcoin halving, which happens about every 4 years, you're not just going to take your original $100,000 and get out $460,000, go almost 4.6x. If you put it in the right time, you're probably going to go somewhere between 10 to 20. So you're going to actually have more, and you're not worried about having to manage that property throughout that time. So because the technology of Bitcoin is so new, you could really be focusing on growth over cash flow if you are completely bullish on Bitcoin, if you're completely bullish on the crypto narrative, and then in 5 to 10 years have actually a lot more economic energy on the out, and then you can go back into real estate if you want and then get your cash flow. But we're in such a new tech adoption that we're still, for me, on the early side of the kind of parabolic curve that you want to just pour into it now. Cash flow is always going to be there with real estate. That game is not going to end anytime soon. But what is going to end is these ridiculous returns. I mean, last time we saw Bitcoin go in the bear from 3,000 all the way up to 69,000. That's about 23 or 24x.
Yeah.
If you do that with your 100,000, you're going to come out with 2.3 million rather than around 660. So
yeah,
and you're not going to have to manage it, and you're not going to have to worry about it. And for me, that's beautiful right now.
And that's the math on paper. And happened.
That's the napkin math. And a lot of that has to do, all those things were many assumptions. One, that your real estate's going to kind of probably, everything I just said, your real estate doubles in value in about 5 years. And once again, this is just a rough example. The other thing is that you time the Bitcoin market and you didn't buy at a top. You have to have bought somewhere roughly closer to the bottom, and then you'll ride it to the top, and then, and then you'll hold it. But the other thing that's going to happen with Bitcoin is you're going to eventually be able to leverage that to buy other assets in the future, so you don't even have to sell it. And it's going to be seen
real
as
estate
like
already exists. Is
exactly that already exists.
I can borrow against it,
sure,
if I want.
You could do a
someone
HELOC.
Else's yeah. Well, or other mechanisms, like if I have it in my IRA, like my IRA can own a bunch of assets, and then I'm borrowing not even particularly against that asset, but against my portfolio. These portfolio lines of credit, and so there's established mechanisms. So I agree with it. Like, for example, I would be a liar if I said I don't believe in growth and wealth based on growth. But the sure thing is, though it's smaller numbers, wealth based on cash flow is kind of like earning capacity. I would, if I had to exchange all of my money for a higher earning capacity, I would exchange every asset I currently own and move into my car to accelerate. I would make this exchange for earning capacity because I have this self-reliant belief in my skills that I could absolutely do anything. And I already have that. And it's kind of the same with cash flow, one in the hand versus two in the bush. But you're getting at a point, though, is nuance. For a Bitcoin Maxi, they've been in the nuance. And I think, like, I would be a liar if I didn't say, well, I'm a little more confident in wealth based on growth, because in the early part of the pandemic, we had set aside from our cash flow, we had a bag of like 5K. And we swore that when the market had hit a 2-year low, we would just move it into the market. TradFi, by the way. And in TradFi, in like 9 months, I think we 3x'd. And then in another 8 months, we added another X. So we 4x'd the money to like 20K. Then we took our bag, and it was tough to sell because it was already growing. And now you're in this growth loop of, should I sell now? Should I sell now? And so for me, I will always come back to cash flow of all kinds. Now, I'm not opposed to like treating Bitcoin like the new real estate plus, like, but these mechanisms, entrepreneurs, contrary to popular belief, entrepreneurs are risk averse. And a lot of the entrepreneurs are going to miss out on the growth you're talking about. And I'm on the edge because I'm like, I know for a fact I could buy another 2 properties with 100K that cash flow me, that I could borrow against in the future, that have but the growth I care shit about the growth. I would get rid of all growth wealth if I could just increase my cash flow wealth. But maybe I'm over programmed and I need to pay attention to how I can channel that cash flow into Bitcoin, which I'm doing. I mean, I dollar cost average, but you seem so confident that it's a red flag. Overconfidence is a red flag for me that I'm like, I need to go do more homework here. And Robert Kiyosaki, though, is throwing red flags all day on real estate. So I'm kind of caught between
Yeah,
worlds.
and I think and Jay, I want to pass you the mic on this too because I'm
Yeah, yeah.
interested
Good
to
morning.
know. Yeah, but
Morning.
the Jay, we got here because Grant had shared that piece about Robert Kiyosaki, which is Mr. Excuse me, Mr. Real Estate Cash Flow. This is how you build wealth. This is what you need. Saying, I'm gonna not buy real estate anymore. I'm gonna go into this. Now, a lot of Kiyosaki is built on libertarian principles of like, I don't want the government to control anything. And at the end of the day, the government controls all real estate in the United States. They can come in with eminent domain anytime they want, pay you fair market value for your property, but just take it from you and say, yeah, that's not yours anymore. Here's what it should be. And here's the money because we print cash. And this has
Yeah.
happened all over the border in Texas, especially in Arizona and New Mexico, where they've been trying to build a border wall for the past 20 years. They'll just come through and say, yeah, this is ours. Thanks a bunch. Here's fair market value. Buy. And the land that, your family had and they were cattle ranching for 3 generations is gone. So a lot of this is built on very much Kiyosaki saying, okay, what can I own that I believe the use case is going to go up, that's exceedingly scarce, that needs little to no attention, and that the government can't touch? Well, that's Bitcoin if you really get down to it. And I think that that's really where his case comes from. But for me, it's like, I think if you put $100,000 into those 2 rental properties, or you put $100,000 into Bitcoin and you wait 10 years, I think you'd be really more regretting the Bitcoin than you would not putting it into the cash flow. Now, once again, this is also assumes that you don't need the money to cash flow to survive. You don't need that money from day to day. I think the short-term gains that you get from cash flow are blinding people from the long-term gains of owning Bitcoin and the community that's really going to let you into. If Kiyosaki had to write Rich Dad Poor Dad again today, he would probably be talking about Bitcoin and be talking about Ethereum and running your own nodes. Because really, if you could run your own nodes and get 6% back, that's going to be way better than anything else humanity's kind of ever really had.
I got a pitch for you guys.
Let's do
We
it.
should write Robert Kiyosaki to write a new book called Rich Dad, Crypto Dad.
I like the name.
Jay, I got a chuckle out of Jay.
You got to chuckle out, Jay. It's not even 7 a.m. people on the East Coast. I don't think that's ever. We write down the time and date.
But like, he would be DTF, dude. And
Okay,
we
let's
would
do it.
write-
I think we should. I think we should hit him
We
up
need
on
a
Twitter.
And we need a roadmap for like, okay, because he's all about infopreneuring. So we write the book, then we have a course, we do the normal thing, but write about, how, and use him to work, to maybe even do a webinar with him and go, hey, how has this changed? And how would we rewrite Rich Dad, Poor Dad in a crypto, knowing what we now know?
Well, the thing that you said about the title is really fascinating because it's like if you go from Rich Dad, Poor Dad, what you're saying is, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, depending on how you interpret it, he's like, my rich dad told me this and my poor dad told me this. You're basically saying the rich dad who taught him about real estate, who taught him all these things, who taught him the tenants, new tenants that, hey, your single family home is not an asset. And I will say that as loud as I can from the rooftops, standing in suburban America where everyone thinks that's the zenith to wealth creation. And I had this conversation yesterday with a friend and I broke down the math. And I said, you're going to have to hold this thing a good amount of time just to get past closing costs if you want to sell it again, unless the market goes up, right? You're assuming the market goes up if you want to sell it again because of the closing costs. So the funny thing about calling it Rich Dad, Crypto Dad is that Rich Dad, the way things used to be, which is real estate essentially, or kind of what Kiyosaki talks about, is now dead. And I love that. It's, saying there's this new thing in the Crypto Dad, which is, to be honest, most millennial fathers in the United States, that's going to be the way that they're going to start to put their money. It's going to be into NFTs, or it's going to be into, maybe not NFTs, that's a stretch, but unless it's a blue chip NFT, but it's going to be into Bitcoin and Ethereum and USDC. That's where they're going to hold their money. So anyways, I think we can go down this a lot longer, but we're always going to look back, Grant, on these conversations you and I have in 2022 in 10 years, and then we'll know. And my conviction is that as Bitcoin grows as a global, kind of could be the backing and the new, the new dollar, the new global reserve currency. You have 8 billion people that are going to want 21 million houses. Would you rather own one of the 21 million houses, digital houses, or would you rather own some, rental property anywhere in the world? What about earning yield on BTC? So you could earn yield on BTC on BlockFi for some time, and you could also earn when you earned yield on BlockFi, you could also earn it in BTC, even if you were earning yield on your Ethereum or your USDC. But at least stateside, they have taken away that yield option. So I'm not sure of another place where you could earn yield on BTC. But Brian, if you know about a place, please, cryptocurrency earn interest on Bitcoin. Looks like you put a link in the chat.
Yeah, I'm looking for this. And what is that interest? And this raises a great point about freedom, financial freedom. You're talking about growth. Hold it for 10 years. You're going to look back and be sad. Well, if you just switched out, if you played Mad Libs and you switched out the terms, if you just bought oil stocks, BP, for the next 10 years and held out and didn't need the cash flow, you'll be happy. If you miss this window, you'll be sad. And it probably won't hockey stick in the way crypto does. But we said this about Wall Street bets. We said it about a lot of things. And I don't disagree, but when I think about financial freedom as the context, I think about what are the principles of wealth building and what is wealth. And wealth comes from the Latin root weal, W-E-A-L, which means holistic wellness. With cash flow today in real estate, the next 10 years, I don't have to eat ramen. The next 10 years, and wait for growth. I can enjoy my wealth with cash flow now and still get the growth on my real estate. Maybe not hockey stick growth. So when it comes to financial freedom and well-being, weal meaning well-being and wholeness, I guess, are you assuming when you suggest to someone, hey, put your 100K over here, are you assuming it's surplus extra 100K lying around, or these are their only nuggies?
I mean, I think it could go either way. I do think that there's a thing here where you need to be able to eat. But what you just said, I'm going to make a parallel that's probably going to blow your paradigm up here, Grant. So,
okay.
You ready?
Bring it. I'm ready.
I heard this yesterday. This is from Naval Ravikant talking about entrepreneurs. And he was like, the reason why a lot of people don't want to be an entrepreneur and spend 4 or 5 years ideating a product or a service and making it better and doing all this is because it's uncertain. Whereas what is certain? Going to get a paycheck. That's certain. You're going to start getting that every month for the time that you put in. But if you do entrepreneurship right, he's like, what happens is after 4 or 5 years, he's like, this happens for everyone. There'll be somebody who launches a product and it goes to the moon and they're a unicorn company. They're a $1 billion valuation, but it rarely does happen. But he said, this is why people don't like entrepreneurship, because they don't want to wait to get their bag and to get their recognition and to have a little bit of success through what society calls success by making money. So then everyone says that they're not crazy for thinking that, maybe people should share their spare bedroom in their apartment for Airbnb. Maybe you can use your Toyota Prius to drive people around the city because you're already using it anyways, and we'll call it Uber. And so the analogy I want to make to you is the exact one that he kind of draws. You getting cash flow is making you feel secure, like a monthly paycheck. Mm-hmm. But really, the real bag to wealth, for me at least, is making sure that I'm investing in a way that I'm finding the best investment to really get that hockey stick. Because I'd rather have $5 million in 5 years than have cash flow all the way up to those 5 years. 100%.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Jay, what's your take on that? Where do you stand on that, Jay?
I don't know. It sounds like you're both saying the same thing. It's just like whether you want the instant gratification or you want it down the road.
That's exactly the point I'm getting at, Jay. I think the way even Grant talks about it, it's more of a it's more of a salary. It sounds like more of a salary. You want to get paid monthly as opposed to waiting for your bag for years. But
No, I
I'm
think
saying
I'm double dipping. I'm getting both. That's my
you
point.
right, but I think when you get both, I don't think that your growth in the properties is as great as it would be in another asset, this being Bitcoin or crypto, different cryptos. Because in the
Okay,
long run, I just
interesting.
don't think that
So you're
even if
playing the middle game where in your lifetime, like in the 10 years, we'll say, and let's just
Sure.
assume it happens. And I do believe this opportunity and others will absolutely hockey stick in the next 10 years. And to your point, it sounds like I'm getting the salary now. Well, it's surplus on top of my earned income. So that's that point. But I am getting that money
exactly.
now. What am I doing with that money? I went to Iceland. So I got the benefit of what like in 10 years it hockey sticks. You got 10 million or 2 million in Bitcoin now. Now what do? Well, you got to move it into your accounts somehow or use it. But in 10 years, you could probably have some liquidity and don't have to bring it as a taxable event into the Americas. But you're going to pay some taxes on it of some kind. And what you didn't do, like you would in entrepreneurship, is you didn't cultivate necessarily. It doesn't assume that you cultivated the skills of money management. This is why I love entrepreneurship because I hear this argument. I've heard this argument before about entrepreneurship. You're delaying, you're sleeping on floors. No, I haven't made $1 million. I haven't had an exit or a unicorn in my entrepreneurship, but I have traveled around the world managing my company. I've enjoyed benefits as if I were a millionaire without being a millionaire because I had it. Meanwhile, the growth on my properties won't hockey stick in the same way over 10 years, but it will over 100. It will over 1,000. And my point is I'm playing the short and long game, and it sounds like you're playing maybe the middle and long game on just this investment. Like if we were comparing like just this investment to real estate. And so and mind you, for the public watching, we're having this debate and I think it's healthy, but for transparency, I am stacking Bitcoin, right? Like I am,
Right. You're
I am
taking the
also
cash
doing
flow.
that.
Yeah, you're taking some of the cash flow, not just living well in the short term, but also stacking for the long term. And I do think that that is the best of both worlds. But I think I don't also extrapolate anything past 10 years on real estate. I'll push back on anyone because no real
Interesting.
estate in the places where people buy real estate in the United States is going to be there or you're going to want to live there. It's run by political ideologies that I just think are driving it into the ground. And it's also in places that are going to be
Interesting.
overrun with natural disasters. So,
Interesting.
in 100 years, Florida's not going to be there. And these are facts that we have to start to really understand.
Well, I live in Central Florida, and we believe that our future investment will eventually be beachfront.
Exactly. You're right. They'll be very much beachfront. So, but anyway, yeah, it's interesting that Jay hears that we're saying the same thing because I think that what anyone would hear, and I think Jay's picking up on this, is we're both talking about different ways to the same end, which is probably having a pretty nice bag to then decide what you want to do with. One may get there with not sleeping on floors and eating ramen for, I guess, a kind of very simplistic entrepreneurial image. But the other one may get there, like you're saying, traveling the world and doing all that. So, Grant, you just dropped some stuff in here. Is that you?
Sorry, I forgive what I dropped in the comments. It's not formatting well. I clicked Brian Naughton's link here, and to close that loop because Brian gave us this awesome service is
this is Nexo.
Yeah, you can earn 7%, up to 8% on Nexo, up to 6% on Crypto.com, up to 5% on Binance, and up to 4% on BlockFi. Not bad. I'm earning 4.5% with my Cardano on some staking pools, but 7 to 8%, 6% even on some of these places. That's not bad. And to Brian's point, and to credit your points, this is a form of cash flowing that could be commensurate with real estate because if you had 100K in Bitcoin and we're pulling 7 to 8% APR and you're not stressing, okay, so yeah, to compare apples to apples, that is definitely worth looking into to see, okay, well, could I also get a drip like I do on my real estate rents? That's interesting.
Maybe the thing to consider throughout, for the conversation is a lot of this stuff is cyclical as well, right? Like,
agreed.
Right now, real estate is plateauing. Like, if you look at new, well, at least in Canada, you look at new housing prices, we're clearly in a real estate bubble, and it's about ready to pop. If you just look at it historically, there was a bubble. This chart is doing the same thing that it did in 2008, that it did in 91, and in both cases there was a massive housing price crash. And so all of that stuff is cyclical, you know. Bitcoin is down right now, but in Jarrett is saying in a few more years it's going to be up, and then after that it's going to be down again, and then it's going to be up, and it just works like that. But the real thing to remember, and I think, Grant, this is what you're trying to say, is diversification is really what's important. You can't just have all of your eggs in one basket.
That's the story behind the story. You're right.
Yeah, like if you do invest in, let's say, like your Bitcoin only, and you invest only in Bitcoin, if you just happen to invest 2 or 3 years too late, you could find that 5 years from now all of your investments come right back down to zero, not to zero, but to the place where you started, and then you sort of start over, and you got to wait until you get to that 10-year mark. That could possibly happen. And so, like, at that point, you realize how important diversification is. Because when I was talking to Cress last night, you guys remember Cassandra?
Oh, yeah. I've been trying to nail down a time with her. I love having combos with her. Go ahead.
Yeah, and so she was basically, her theory is like, the way that it sort of works for her is like, when one thing is up, another thing is down. You know, we sort of play these trade-offs. There's never a point where like everything is suppressed. There are always opportunities in the market, and it's just for you to find them. And so, like, if you're able to diversify in that way, so which are the industries and which are the areas of investments that are most important to you at whatever time cycle you happen to find yourself in, then that's
well said.
The best way.
That's well said. And Kiyosaki is living that by example, to give credit to what Jarrett's been on about since we met. That this is the thing to do. But this is what I like about being a financial freedom maxi, as opposed to, I'm not even a real estate maxi. I am a financial freedom maxi, which is why when Robert Kiyosaki raised his flag and said, hey, hold on, this is like the last of 1,000 straws to break the camel's back, right? And pointing to the cycles that Jay is talking about. And so I guess the real conversation we should have is, what should if you only had $1,000 to invest, where would you invest it? If you had 10,000 or 100,000, how would you invest it? And that might have looked different 10 years ago than it would today. And I don't mean in hindsight. In hindsight, 10 years ago, we all would have spent 100,000 on Bitcoin and rode that pony, even in the down market, but not in hindsight. But if we could put ourselves in that frame of mind, what would that portfolio be? And, I applaud Jay. I know we razz him all the time about investing in himself. If I only had $1,000 to invest, I would literally invest it into myself. I'd go to the highest profile expo I could that had the most amount of material or learning library, meet as many people as I could, and then build on that. If I had 10,000, I would buy crypto and some DeFi and TradFi, and then do the thing that Jay would do, and that's invest in yourself. And if I had 100,000, I would do in today's market, I would do that, and then do real estate. So it's a valid point in that having this conversation, shifting my priorities. I would say then, to that point, I guess it's not us talking about Bitcoin versus real estate, really. It's what's the priority and when, and what resources do you have access to?
But also what percentages of each you try to own. Like, I think part of what's missing is, a lot of times when you hear people having these conversations about, like, the percentages of their portfolio, it's almost like they're sort of making it up, like what percentage I should own there. But they're actual like financial and mathematical equations that you use to determine how much of my portfolio is Bitcoin versus real estate versus TradFi versus cash. And so it's important to really do the research to ensure that your portfolio mix is adequate for what you're trying to achieve, the state that you are in your personal life, but then also what's happening in the market. Obviously, like, it doesn't make a ton of sense to be buying up new real estate right now unless what you're actually thinking about is, hey, I'm gonna use this to ensure that I have a consistent line of income coming in through rental payments. And
Yeah.
maybe that makes business sense for you because cash flow is what you really need. You invest this money,
Yeah.
that you have continual cash flow. But if it's not, then maybe it's more of a long-term play for, say, investing in cryptocurrency, where I don't get what I would typically get in TradFi, which is like dividends, and I can just sort of sit on it for 5 or 10 years and wait. But then there are other things that you could be investing in, right? So maybe not TradFi, but I could be angel investing. There
Yeah.
are lots of, like, we talk about Roger Williams and Li-Fi and all of this other amazing technology,
Yeah.
Web3 tech and other pieces of, AI, quantum computing, biotech, all of this stuff that's happening right now at the same time. There's lots of angel investing opportunities that
Yeah.
could also pay off in the long term. And so it's really hard. How do you find the right mix of all of this stuff?
It would be interesting. I wonder if we should put together our own Not Crypto Bros Patreon for just a token fee, and then put in the three of us, our actual distributions. I do this for my own Patreon. And to your point, Jay, I just rebalanced. So for the longest time, all income of mine, all of it, earned and unearned, all land into a specific account. And the first thing I do right off the top is I distribute it in set distributions in terms of financial freedom, um, big like emergency fund. So financial freedom, emergency fund, and fun and adventure, and then living expenses. And that's how my money waterfalls. And the financial freedom is then divided up into three groups: crypto, TradFi, DeFi. I'm sorry, crypto, TradFi, real estate. And for right up until recently, and this again, even though I've been making the case for real estate, I already have some real estate. So I have restructured my my portfolio to be like 50%. It was 50% crypto of the money dumping into financial freedom. 50% went to crypto, 30% went to TradFi, and 20% went into real estate. That's because I already have real estate holdings, and I'm not. A lot of things have to happen credit wise and payoffs wise before I can get into my next Plex, which is what my goal is. So I thought, well, why don't I just start stacking crypto when this cycle is the way it is? And just last week, we decided to reconfigure again. And so I would find it very interesting, and maybe even adding a line item to Jay's point. How much of your investable income, not living expenses, not emergency fund, investable income, how much of your investable income goes to personal development, skills development, right? Investing in yourself. And then how much goes into, and I would include in that entrepreneurship, but then crypto and real estate. Do you guys actually have set allocations on how you distribute surplus or investable money?
Jay looks like he's shaking his head. I'd like Jay to answer this because I think the investing in yourself is often like, it sounds like a cool t-shirt, but I don't think many people do it well. And I think Jay is actually
I
probably
agree.
someone that does do it well. So I'd love to hear him talk. And then I'm going to blow this entire conversation up with some maxi talk. So Jay, go ahead.
Go for it. Okay. Jay, what do you
Yeah.
got?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I decided a long time ago that instead of investing in real estate, that I was going to invest in education. So all of the money, so like in the last 5 years, I've probably spent $250,000 in education, which is probably what somebody else would have put into their mortgage. So for me, that's really how I do it.
But is that it? That's your allocation? All investable income goes into education, even still.
No, not directly into education anymore. I'd say a lot of it just gets recycled back into the business,
Okay,
and
so we call those plowbacks
yeah.
Okay, got it.
Mhm.
Okay. Jarrett, blow it up with Maxi Talk.
All right, here it comes. Prepare, everyone.
I'm ready.
If you haven't had your coffee, go down to your coffee store. So Look, I call it a coffee store. You can tell how ignorant I am. It's a coffee shop. So, Raoul Paul was actually talking this morning, the macro investor. I just think he's absolutely brilliant, and I latch on to everything he says. I think he does it in a way that's apolitical. I think he does it in a way that's totally, if he was living in space looking down at Earth at the market, this is what his opinion would be. It's fairly objective as opposed to being subjective. And he said that he was looking at his crypto holdings, and he remembers when he got into Bitcoin, I think at like $200, and he bought a bunch, and then it went up to $1,000. And I think he was like, he said, I didn't really know what this was. I've never seen any asset go 5x in like 6 months. I was freaking out. And I think he sold more or less around there. And then, he's been on and off selling for the last 10 years, like buying the dips, selling at the tops. And he's made a lot of money this way. He's also made a lot of money because he was a hedge fund manager for, I'm blanking on the hedge fund, but a really well-known hedge fund. And clearly I can't remember. And he said when he looks back, and he does this a lot, he's learned that if he had just held through that entire time and not tried to be cute, he would have had more money. And that's kind of the lesson that Warren Buffett gives us. And it's the lesson that, like, my father buys stuff and he just holds it forever. And, he bought Tesla stock when it like came out, and he's just held through the ups, through the downs, through the Elon's crazy, through he's not crazy, through this, that, and the other. And if you just block that out and you focus on, I believe in this product, or, my conviction is strong, and you don't try to get cutesy and rebalance and do that, I think that is really, like, we have case study that works. Now, the most important part is you have to choose the right horse, which is where diversification comes in. Because if you had bet on Yahoo over Google, you would still be ruining that today. If you had bet on Bing over Google, you'd still be ruining that today. If you had bet on Ask Jeeves over Google, you'd still be ruining that today. But I think when you have conviction around something and you hold it for a long time, I really think if we're just talking about TradFi, and then we can obviously lump this into Bitcoin or crypto, I really feel like that's where it comes from. But obviously this comes from a place of privilege, because in order to put money into something and hold it for 10, 20, 30, 40 years, you have to be able to see these things go up and down and say, man, I should take it, not be greedy, because it's gone 30x or 100x. But for me, and this is something that someone said in the last 2 years, and it's kind of changed my mind. It made me understand why Buffett holds Coca-Cola, and he has forever. Now, Coca-Cola has dividends, I believe, so that's a little bit different because there's a cash flow mechanism.
Huge.
That's a completely different thing. But they basically said, look, in life, there's going to be one winner, right? There's only one Usain Bolt. There's only one LeBron James. There's only one Lionel Messi. So when you find these things in investing, don't sell them when they're down. Don't sell them when they're injured. Hold them. Just hold them. If your conviction is strong. And the other thing is, diversification is for those that don't know anything about the market. And I will say this as loud as I can, but if the only way you get exposure to the market is a 401k, that is fine, but you have to be honest with yourself. That just means that you're not taking the time to learn about investing and what that looks like. And that's totally fine, because some people have a low information diet for how they build wealth, and they just want to have their rental property, maybe a cash flowing real estate property, and they want to have their 401k or just buy ETFs or Vanguards. The reality of it is, in the ETF, to say there's 10 companies that are putting in, or, the Vanguard growth thing is like 6 or 7 growth companies. You need to just find the best company, take the time, do DYOR, right? The fashion company of Web3 or investing, the Dior. And you need to just figure out what the actual winning pony is, and then put all your money there when your conviction is finally aligned with your education and your overall self-empowerment. That is how I feel about this. And so I think out of crypto, you have 22,000 coins. I know that 99% of them are going to go to zero in the next 5 to 10 years. So let me focus on the 5 to 10 coins, the 50 to 100 things that I actually think are actually going to do well. And that's where I'm going to put all my energy. But I think diversification is not understanding what's going on. And when you sit around something long enough and you know what's going on, you got to just make your bets. And then you got to have conviction through the hard and through gullies and the peaks. And if that's your long-term growth, that's where it is.
P.S. Not financial advice to anyone jumping in.
Yeah, where's my shirt that says not financial advice?
Yeah, NFA. I want to answer one definition of terms for the public, and because you answered it accurately, and I used the word inaccurately, I used the word rebalance, and you spoke to that. And for those who don't know, traditionally rebalance is meant to understand You decide on an ideal mix in your portfolio. You've had a mix in your portfolio. You decide on a new ideal mix. And so you sell and buy in order. So you sell ponies you've been riding, you sell the Usain Bolt that you've been holding, you sell Coca-Cola, whatever it is, in order to get that right mix. And now that everything is set up right, you now release it back into the public and then set it and forget it. And the hope is that you picked a good balance. And this strategy has proven to never work. The next best strategy, in terms of compounding, the next best strategy has been to buy the market, to buy the Vanguard 500 index fund, the S&P 500, because the averages come out. Now, I will challenge you. That was point one. I used it in a way where when I used the word rebalance, all I meant is reallocate my distributions. I don't sell anything. I don't sell anything except that one example I gave where we rode it from 5K to 20K. We liquidated because we knew what we were doing next because of the cycles Jay was talking about.
Right.
We knew that this property in Cocoa Beach, Florida was on point. It will cash flow. It murdered it. Our peak month was 5K. Our lowest month was 2K. Like, boom, it's doing all right. And we get to go stay in it. And someone else manages it. I don't worry about it at all. This is the least amount I've had to work for an investment in a long time. And so that's how I used rebalance, and I used it mistakenly. You answered it correctly, so I agree with that entirely. But I would push back on diversification is for those who don't know anything for the market. I'd say that there's several cycles. For those just starting out, if someone were to take me to lunch and say, Grant, what should I do? I'd say, buy the S&P 500, buy Vanguard, and just ride it, and then do your homework. I totally agree with the homework. Then I'd say, with a certain portion of your money, the riskable portion, buy the 10 that are returning the S&P 500 the best. But here's the flaw in that logic. They don't return the best over time. They return the best over a cycle. And so the reason you buy the market is statistical analysis proves that that's not ignorance. That's actually the best riskless growth-based play. But to your point, which I do want to hype, I want to hype this one point that I think we do all agree in. Jay invested $250K in this point. And what we're saying is in terms of, and might be something we need to talk about in our financial freedom thing is, what is your prioritization? If you had $1,000, where would you start? 10, 20, like at some point, get something diversified to buy yourself time so that you're at least growing a little while you're learning. Then on a certain percent of your income, roll the dice on something that you think could blow up. But picking the market statistically does not work. Picking the pony statistically doesn't work. Now, you though you're a Bitcoin maxi, but I think the story behind the story, and we won't talk about your numbers, but you did have a significant win that earned you stripes where you had a visceral experience of investing here, watching it hockey stick. And so without talking about your numbers, can you talk about your percent of return? That at peak, like your bag versus your investment at peak?
Yeah, I'd have to look at everything because some stuff I've been holding since 2017. And I mean, I'll be very open. My biggest return to date was probably Engine. I got in at under 3 cents, and at one point it was over $4. So I'll let everyone at home do the math. So you don't have to invest a lot when you go 100x plus. But yeah, my thing about the diversification is just that when you look at those 10 ponies you're talking about, you got to choose the one that you think is going to win. And you're totally right. Statistically, this doesn't work out. But I'd also push back that statistically, most people don't do the work. And when it comes to investing and thinking about retirement, it's a low information diet for everyone, right? And I'm not talking, the other thing I think when people talk about this, because you're totally right. If somebody asks me, hey, what should I invest in? Well, first of all, I go back to the idea that we spoke about the other day, which is that if someone asks you for advice on investment, they actually don't want to learn about investment. They're looking for a get rich scheme. So anyone
so sell them an MLM right there and then.
Yeah. So yeah, why don't you buy my product and get a downline? So my thing there is like, you know, if somebody asks me how to work out, I'm like, you haven't done your own research. You haven't even bought the gym membership. You just need to go do burpees in your room till you can't breathe, right? Like we can all do things to push our body and get our heart rate up. You can go run, go outside and sprint down the street. Like that's for free. So I go back to the same thing with the stocks and with crypto. It's like, I think if you do the research, and I also want to push back in stocks, and this is such a TradFi thing. Well, the S&P has never failed. That's the best thing to get into. I'm like, bro, the S&P hasn't really taken into account when people talk about that tech over the last 20 years. The last 20 years, tech and leverage of the internet and network effects has totally changed the way the entire investing game works. And so I think that if you look at those numbers over the last 20, maybe even 15 years compared to the previous 100 years that people normally use about the S&P, I think tech throws it way out of whack. Right. So if there's a company that's selling a single product and they have an actual marginal, rate of production for every new unit versus tech, which is like, Twitter can have infinite amount of users and run ads. Well, I'm going to go with that. If Coca-Cola and Twitter started on the same day, I think Twitter would have done better. Right. Than the product of Coca-Cola. But that's just my use case on using the internet as leverage. And I'm now sounding like Naval Ravikant here. And I don't think that's the worst thing. But I truly believe that if you are diving in and you have real conviction, this is why Gary Vee, and once again, this is a statistical thing that's not going to work in your favor unless you do the research. Gary Vee was early on Facebook. Gary Vee was invited on Series B or Series C on Uber. And that's because, and he chose some of these things. Now, he also chose things that didn't work. But I do think you have to probably choose 2 or 3 ponies. Maybe you just don't go with the one like Bitcoin maxis, because I do think Jay's right. It also depends on where you come in on the cycle. But even if you got the top of 2013 in Bitcoin when it was like $800, $1,000 and you held for 10 years, well, you're still doing pretty well if you're getting Bitcoin at 1,000. Right. And with the new tech, the earlier you are, the better. Right. And so I don't know. I like to put that out there, and I like to shake the tree a little bit just to say that I do think if you are into investing and you really want to get into investing, a lot of it comes down to research, and you need the conviction to then take your money and go for it. Now, you could be totally wrong, but you're not going to know until you do it. But it's the total risk reward thing, and it comes back to the entrepreneur. I have cash flow through employment and through other gigs. I'm building websites currently for people and helping people that way. So I do have different money coming in that's going to allow me to not have ramen and sleep on the floor. To allow me the privilege to be able to hold money. Because I do think that this is such a privileged conversation when you're talking about investing. Most of the world is in chaos right now. Most of the world lives on $1 to $2 a day, more or less. And there are Maslow hierarchies of needs where people need water, they need shelter, they just need security, they need safety. So talking about putting money away for a rainy day is a very, very privileged conversation. And I do want to say that, and also not financial advice. So, but I think it would be interesting to dive into the percentages that you're talking about. And I would totally share that definitely with people who are interested. I have no problem. I will show anyone my percentages, especially my crypto investments and where it is. But to answer your point, I think if you factor in my engine purchase, I don't know, 20x total. I mean, it's been good because I've been in crypto for 5.5 years now.
Yeah. And so you did sell. So Jay, you did sell. You sold engine.
No, I haven't sold engine.
Oh, you're still holding it?
Yeah.
Oh, shit. I wonder
Grant,
what Naval
Ravikant
Ravikant would say
that's
about taking
the game. I don't take the queen off the chessboard till the game's over, buddy.
So, Jay, I got a question for you. Do you foresee a time when you will get into investing in assets of some kind, TradFi or DeFi?
Yeah, I mean, I think at some point you have to, in everybody's cycle, like you can't, like we all know, like you can't keep trading hours for dollars, right? At some point you got to make your money work for you. And then at some point you get to the point where like just the stuff that you're doing by yourself, that doesn't equate to the amount of growth that you really want. And so then you invest in you put your money into other person's companies and their dreams and whatever they have going on. I think that's the point in life that you see a lot of angel investors are. That's where they are in their life. They're like, okay, I've built my real estate company, I've built my medical practice, my law practice or whatever, and I've got this bag, a couple $1 million, and now I'm gonna throw a couple thousand around and see if some other young person can help me to build the next bag. So it's where you are in your life. It's all about like seasons, right?
Yeah, and there's a relatively consistent path too. I know that like if you look at the Forbes list, they all made their millions, billions in different ways. But for those who started with middle income lives, middle class lives, the path and has made money. The path is generally the same. They increase their earning capacity, what you're doing, what all three of us have done. You got your master's, Jarrett, and then you got boots on the ground work everywhere. You've done investing. I've done entrepreneurship since the beginning. So you develop skills and earning capacity. Then you trade time for dollars. And usually it's in the context of sales of some kind. Um, and then Robert Kiyosaki's big on this too. Then there's some form of self-employment or even intrapreneurship, meaning you might be in a job, but you're operating like an entrepreneur within that job, creating leverage there. And then you basically make yourself unemployable. Unless it's tactical, like Jarrett just went and got a job at the Mercy Corps because that's a tactical job, or Ken Cato is unemployable, but Ken Cato went on and got himself a tactical job position. What the heck? Kurzweil. Geez, Ray Kurzweil, the guy that invented Kurzweil pianos, the futurist who wrote the technological asymptote. He was unemployable, but got a tactical job with Google so he could get access to their quantum computing. So you're either unemployable and or tactically employed, and then you're deploying money into cash flowing assets of some kind, typically. Or dividends or something like that, which cash flow sounds immediate, but it isn't necessarily. It's kind of like dividends. It's just, it's compounding somehow, some sort of compounding asset. And then usually into real estate, and then usually into complete spec, like VC stuff. I know that last year we got into some of our first seed/angel investments, and they haven't produced anything. I mean, nothing. Growth, relationship, actually the opportunities and relationships that have come out of the knowledge from the people we have met in the circles is worth more than anything we've earned from the investment. Which, fun fact, I had a real estate mentor who hit his number. He was a real estate developer in Vero Beach, Florida. And he turned the keys over to his shopping center to me and said, I want you to collect all the rents while I'm gone. He was gone for like 6 months. And one of his trips was a cruise that you had to have a bank verified $1 million liquid cash, not in assets, in the bank in order to get on the cruise. And once you were on the cruise, everything was covered, meaning it didn't cost anything. Like there was no cost. You just had to have a verified million. They paid for it. And the deal making that came out of that trip, they got percentage of. The cruise did. Whoever put on the cruise. They got like a 10% commission rate for all the relationships that happened. And he ended up doing a real estate deal with the Chinese, for all of China, director of education, and doing commercial real estate development in Beijing for like a small window of time back in late 2010s, the 20 aughts. And so that idea of that season of life where you're investing is nuts. But I think I'd like to maybe in a future conversation talk about if you had to give advice, if someone had $100, $1,000, $10,000, $100,000, what each of your advices would be, knowing what you now know. Now, Jay said he's invested $250K, and at some point in the cycle, he's going to invest in assets. But like, when is that?
Yeah, Jay, that was my question too. When is that? Like, what are you waiting for? Is it this bottom maybe in crypto where you're like, all right, I'm gonna hop in? Is it for you personally, hey, when I'm this year's old? Is it, I think, because like I think for me investing is a mix of like where I am personally in my like life, as well as where I am with the markets, as well as where I am financially. And those are three different constantly moving circles that kind of are in and out. And like Grant says, I think it's really important also to say, and I want to just say this out loud, if you are just stacking cash underneath your mattress and sleeping on top of it, and that's on the floor, and you want to live that life, that's totally a way to do it. But I think it's some mix of the two of YOLO, which is like you only live once, therefore probably invest so that way you don't have to trade time for money, or at least have that option. But also you only live once, so make sure you get to go to Iceland. Make sure you get to go see the things in the world and live live. So, but Jay, when for you is that moment?
Yeah, I think you got to understand the opportunity cost. So like
Mm.
if right now you've got $10,000, like yeah, you could um invest in real estate and you could maybe make a bag there. Like let's say you invest in and you make $1 million in real estate, you know, does that $1 million help you as much as taking that same $1,000 and investing in like joining your, I don't know, some kind of local business club or something like that, where you can make connections, and then a year from now you've got the right connections that help you to make $10 million versus the 1 million that you would have made the year in real estate. So you sort of have to be able to see what can happen in each opportunity with each opportunity and weigh the risk. For me, I'm looking at the fact that when I invest in myself, you know, at whatever point it is that I decide to do something else, I'm going to be in the best possible place to do what that next thing is, right? As
Mm.
opposed to like investing in something right now and not being, of sound enough mind to be able to understand what's happening and to be able to take advantage of it. There are lots of people who invested in Bitcoin. I forget who you were talking about just now, Jarrett, like invested at 300 and then sold at 1,000 because they didn't have the right education and experience to understand that, hey, this is going to go to 50 or this is eventually going to go to 100. Like, so the investment isn't the issue. Like anybody can invest, right? Lots of people stumble into good investments all the time. Everybody has that friend that gives them an investment tip. And if you take it, you might become a millionaire. But it's about having enough information to understand when is the right time to get in, when is the right time to get out. And I think you only get that when you first invest in yourself.
Mm. Mm. You know that you know what it's really revealing to me, something that I absolutely stand on. State of the Spark, my parent company with corporate training. I when I started it, not corporate training, personal development training. Um, and that's gotten into corporate training. I started with goals, and it seemed almost rudimentary, almost demeaning to people. Like, "Hey, what's your goal?" And people like, don't you have any hotter tips than goals? And it's like, okay. And then after a few years, I kept riding this pony of like, I think that you're jumping strategies because you don't have a North Star. Because the more you learn, there's a quote in scripture, much learning doth make thee mad. Meaning, yeah, you could learn a lot and have a lot of skills. Um, have a lot of, this guy, a LinkedIn user, forgive me, for some reason your name didn't come through.
It's
High conviction. Who is
it's
that?
I got it here. Shoot.
Yeah, I can only see LinkedIn user on
Just
my side too.
Justin T.
Oh, it's Justin
Justin
Tate.
T.
That's our guy. He's in our he is into investing, and if you're in our Discord at all, he's Mavericks. He's a technical trader, but he also does a lot of good DGen plays. He offers a lot of insight. You guys need to know Justin Tate, aka Mavericks, in on Twitter, but also in our Discord. Check him out. So high conviction plays. You can have all of this, but if you don't know your goals, like Jarrett's goal is to hit that number with Bitcoin or with crypto, but also Jarrett's personal life goals allow him the luxury of an intense amount of delayed gratification. Now, I know Jarrett, and he's not 100% Mr. Delayed Gratification, but he's closer than the average person I know. In fact, both of you are. With Jay's commitment to self-education, that is like the longest long-term conviction of what you want out of life. And so knowing the cost benefit, the only way to know the opportunity cost, Jay, the only way to know what the opportunity cost is to know what your goals are. The opportunity cost is only measured against A, the cost, but B, the opportunity of what? And so maybe
Yeah,
this is a privileged conversation, but it's also a contextual one. Go ahead, Jared.
yeah, I think that that's spot on. And I think before I talk with anyone about financial anything, especially my friends, because the closer you are to someone and you talk to them about money, and maybe money for them is a trigger, it can
Yeah.
become a really uncomfortable conversation quick. But
Yeah.
I don't talk to anyone about anything past what's your goals. You just need to tell me what your goal is. And most people don't have goals when it comes to their finances. So it becomes a really tough conversation, because if you don't have a goal, then you're not going to change your routine or your habits or challenge yourself and maybe cut down some of your limiting beliefs. And you see this all the time in
Yeah.
working out. There's a reason why everyone joins the gym in January, especially back in college. Everyone was in the
Yeah.
gym in January because they were going to spring break in March and they wanted to look good. But by April, no one was in the gym because spring
Yeah.
break had happened. But they had their goal and they came in and worked out. So if you don't have a goal, especially when it comes to money and finances, if you don't have
Yeah.
your lifestyle, like you're saying, your real estate mentor had his number. I just think it's super difficult, because then it goes back to Jay's opportunity cost. And I love the way Jay framed that, because he's totally right. It's not an opportunity cost for me. Last night when I was with my buddies, and my buddy didn't get to the bar till 9:45 where we were at, because we got food. We went to see him. He's a soccer coach, and we went to see his team play. Ended up tying, but I got to see a couple of friends. We all went, and then we went to a pub after. We had some food and we were waiting for him. We got there at 8:30. He says he's going to be there by 9. Doesn't show up to 9:45. I say, hey guys, I got to leave at 9:45. I got Not Crypto Bros tomorrow. I need to be ready. I need to get my sleep. I need to be not feeling zonked. And so for me, there's no opportunity cost of not being able to sit at the bar with those guys and chop it up for an extra half an hour, because my goal is, my commitment is to this and helping grow this community and supporting you two. But if that weren't my goal,
Yes.
then the opportunity cost of leaving them would have seemed crazy. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is FOMO.
Yeah.
So you have more increased FOMO the more you don't have conviction around your own goals, whether they be financial or personal.
Yeah.
So we live in a world, I say it all the time, with not enough goals. And that is just another way of saying it. We live in a world of FOMO. People hop on shiny objects. This could be wearing the new Gucci belt that's $500, or putting on the new Yeezys that are $350 in molded plastic. If you don't have a goal, financial, personal, or lifestyle wise, you're going to fall into basically looking for new shiny objects. And because the opportunity cost of not investing in those things, or not doing certain things, or not spending time with certain people won't seem drastic. So Jay, I just love your opportunity cost, and it's going to continue to ring in my mind as I think about this stuff.
Nice.
Yeah, I really think that, and it's not just FOMO. I think we all give into FOMO. Whoop, I'm sorry. It's unfettered FOMO. Like the FOMO you have actually engineered your FOMO. When you're sitting at a pub, and me being a people person, I know what that's like. You're with your people. You're also eyeing people, you're dating life. It's just how life is. And we're out there. But then then a FOMO occurs to you. What if I'm late to Not Crypto Bros tomorrow? I get a FOMO when I'm not at the gym, and that's an engineered FOMO. I get FOMO when I'm not at the beach, because these are things I know I like, and I curate that. And so it's almost like what you're talking about is the world without goals is unfettered FOMO. It's the FOMO that the world has taught you to have. But when you have goals, that actually controls FOMO and says, I need FOMO on this. And I don't want to miss out on crypto plays over the next 10 years. I missed out on enough financial opportunities in my young 20s. I'm not going to do that shit again. Mm-hmm. And so I've engineered my FOMO. Jay has curated FOMO around being uneducated. I'm not going to be the least educated guy in a room. I'm not going to do it. And so that he has an engineered FOMO around, I need to learn about that. That's really good, guys. Hey, I know we didn't talk about crypto today, but I think this is like nuggies. I think this is gold nugget, man. Like this is the most important stuff, man.
Join our Patreon to get nuggies.
Join our Patreon, our Nuggy Patreon. What are your shout outs this week, guys? What are you grateful for?
I'm grateful for you guys. Here's some behind the scenes, everyone. We normally try to log on 30 minutes before to make sure we have our kinks worked out, and like we have our updates, and sometimes computers don't work, and at the end of the day we're just relying on tech. And today was a day where I think we all got our stuff aligned and we were able to get on a little bit. I know Jay was a little late, but I think I don't know, it just seems like for those of you who aren't morning people, and I'm actually a morning person, I just don't have my schedule normally put together for Saturday. So I just want to thank you guys for getting up and talking about this stuff, because I don't have a lot of people in my life I get to talk about this even when they're wide awake at noon. And so I'm super grateful for both of you two for hopping on. And I just love our conversation. And it's cool we get to share it with other people, and maybe they think it's interesting. And Crescenda, hey, how you doing? I just want to say hi. So
It's crazy there.
Yeah, Krusty's there. So my shout out is to you guys for continuing on. Today is episode 24, unless I'm wrong. So that's a big deal. And I was telling my friends last night, they're like, oh, why do you have to leave? I'm like, well, I got to go get online with these guys. Like, who are these guys? I'm like, well, Jay's from St. Kitts, but lives in Toronto, and Grant's in Florida. And they're like, do you know them? I'm like, no, I've never met them. And they're like,
I don't know what they smell like.
These are deep Web 2 people. I don't think either of them own any crypto, or, they don't really spend time on the internet. Their jobs are 100% IRL. And so this world of meeting people on the internet and making friendships, whether it's, through gaming or through fantasy football, they're not really, for example, their fantasy football, they probably know all the members in the fantasy football. So it's not decentralized, right?
Yeah.
I just want to give a huge shout out to you two, because I think that this is really fun. And like I said, I don't normally get to talk to people about any of this stuff, even when they're wide awake. So it's a blessing to talk to you guys, and it's not even 8 o'clock. So there's my shout out.
Jay, shout outs.
Yeah, I'm going to shout out my podcast launch team. We got a couple people that we got together last month to get some podcast launch. Near to the end of the month, things kind of fell apart. Some people got busy and stuff like that. I got really inspired this last week, because like everybody came back and they were like, yeah, I know we were kind of busy, but we want to get back and finish it. And so we had this really cool meeting. And so like it looks like everyone's podcast is going to get launched in November. So we're planning for the launch in November 9th. Everybody's back on track. So that was pretty cool. That really warmed my heart to just see everybody come back and trying to get their stuff launched, and all of the people who are getting into content creation and launching their podcasts. It's a great time.
I'm going to spend my shout out on Krez. I don't know why, but from the one call I had with Krez, and from the umpteen infinite posts of her actual community building, I have an affection for Krez and how she operates. I have a huge respect for it. And she says, awesome, gentlemen, your podcast has no filter. And when most people say that, it's not a compliment.
Not a good thing.
But she's saying it as a compliment, and I can hear her voice saying it. And Krez, I owe you a meeting, because this week we tried to get together, and my schedule kept messing up. We lost an employee. We're losing an employee. She put in her notice this week. And so we've been overwhelmed, and Krez has had a lot of grace. Still putting together a WhatsApp group for a potential deal. Some guy looking to put together an investment deal, and she put together a WhatsApp group, and we followed up with that. And then I watch her from the sidelines build her LinkedIn community like it was going out of style. So I'm spending my shout out today on Crescenda. Definitely. Jarrett, you want to take us out?
Yeah, go ahead. Follow us, everyone, on YouTube, Twitter, and LinkedIn at Not Crypto Bros. We record live here on Tuesdays at 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time, and on Saturdays at 6:30 a.m. Eastern Time. So go ahead, follow us, tweet at us, let us know what you want us to talk about. Saturdays, we do try to focus on business, and on Tuesdays, we probably dive into the market, talk about crypto, TradFi, other investments, anything kind of also happening in popular social media life. So we'll see you Tuesday.
See you guys. Thanks so much. Have a great